Hey, what's up everyone? In this video we're going to be looking at this kid's bike. It's an 18-inch wheel. We'll be doing a general review and showing you how to assemble it. We've been looking all over for the next size up for our kiddo. And here it is right out of the box. I'll put a link in the description below if you're interested in picking one of these up yourself. We're pretty impressed with the bike overall, although it does have some challenging pieces which we will get to soon. But first, here we go. Again, out of the box, everything comes pretty well packaged. There are no obvious scratches or dents or any blemishes. The wheels are attached to the frame, so we'll just kind of snip those off. There are some plastic ties, and so with a scissors or a wire cutters or something, you can just snap those off as shown here. All right, make sure you put down a towel or some type of soft surface to work on if you're assembling this like in your garage like I am. But I'll give you a visual tour of the bike. Again, it's pretty well wrapped. It's got this paper and kind of styrofoam wrapping all around, so you're just going to want to obviously unsnip everything and lay it all out on the floor in front of you. So here are various pieces which I'll unwrap for you. You can see now this particular model comes with these pegs that you can attach to the back axle so that you can stand up on. It also has pedals, obviously. I will not be attaching the pegs in this video. We'll just get everything hooked up. My daughter does not need to, she's a little young for the pegs, so I'll make a separate video if we choose to do that later. It also comes with training wheels, which I will not be installing. The bike's a little big for training wheels, and although you might want to consider installing the training wheels for confidence, I've decided not to. So we'll basically just be putting the pedals on, hooking up the brakes, getting the handlebar installed, and all that basic stuff here. So obviously, you're going to want to take off all the paper and the tape that comes to protect it, and just kind of lay everything out in front of you. Now, inside the box, again, accessories that accompany this particular model. Training wheels, again, we won't be installing those. And of course, it comes with the seat and a cool little pouch where she can put her, stuffed animals for a ride. And that's the handlebar unit there. All right, so let me just unpackage everything so you can just get a visual. Again, a little visual review here. Impressed. Everything looks new. No scratches or scrapes of any type. Things look shiny, and I am overall impressed with the quality coming out of the box. Here's a closer look at the training wheels. If you're interested in installing those, the instruction manual does walk you through that process. And by the way, I'll mention if you're not comfortable with assembling this particular bike, make sure you bring it to your local bike shop. If you incorrectly assemble this, it does obviously run risk. If your brake system's not working or if things aren't on correctly, you can pose significant risk for your child. So again, make sure you understand this really thoroughly. Refer to the instruction manuals, not the contents of this video, to make sure that you've done it correctly. And again, take it in to the professionals if you're not comfortable doing this yourself. That is really important to mention. Okay, so back to business here. Everything seems to be checking out nicely. Notice the paint job. I love the beautiful pink wheels. My daughter is going to be very excited. All right, so let's get started. We're going to take off the plastic covering. They do put some protective plastic coverings on there, and we'll take the washer nut and the wheel retainer off as shown. This is the front wheel. We're going to get the front wheel assembled right now. And to do so could not be simpler. Take out the spacer, the plastic spacer that comes in between there to protect it. You will not be using that plastic spacer again, so you can go ahead and discard that. And make sure the fork right there that you see on the screen, it's clearly labeled rear, so make sure that's pointed in the correct direction. Okay, notice the forward moving little slots right there. I'm going to place the front wheel into that fork, and they're going to sit, those little brackets are going to sit on the axle as you can see here, and then you'll take these little wheel retainers. They're just these little metal kind of clips. They just slide on and they will lock into place. There's a hole. Let me get a closer look there. The end, there you go. You can see that little hole in the middle, and that just kind of sets in there as shown. Very simple to do. And then you'll take your washer head nut and you'll screw that on. And you'll do that to obviously both sides. And refer to the instruction manual. They do have torque requirements. I kind of used my own best judgment, but you'll want to absolutely make sure that's not under or over tightened. You don't want to break anything. Of course, you don't want to run the risk of having that pop out either. So refer to the instruction manual for the appropriate torque requirements. That is super important for the safety of your child. Now, as far as tools that you need, I like to hand tighten everything and then take an adjustable wrench, and you can obviously tighten it up as shown there. All right, and so you want to make sure your front wheel spins freely. All right, so next up we're going to be attaching the handlebar stem. You can see, obviously put the bike up on its front wheel, and we're going to be taking the handlebar stem and inserting it into the little hole there, as you can see in the picture. It does have a minimal insertion line, so you're going to want to make sure that you push that down past the minimal insertion line mark. If it's above that, you can run the risk of it popping out and becoming unsafe, so make sure that is seated appropriately. And I am going to spray a little bit of grease, a little WD-40 underneath that top bolt there. The instructions do indicate that. It's called the expander bolt. So I'm going to make sure that's tight. I'm also going to take a little Allen wrench and make sure that the handlebar unit is tight as well. If they're loose, you can actually adjust the handlebars to move them forward or backwards, but I don't necessarily need to at this point, so I'm just going to make sure everything is tight. Now, before you tighten things down, please make sure, obviously, you want things to be aligned correctly. Everything needs to be straight. And so notice my position. I'm kind of straddling the bike and then making sure it's straight, and then I'll be tightening that center bolt down that you can see there, the expander bolt. Okay, and basically when you tighten that, that's going to expand the bottom of it and lock it into place. Again, check the instruction manual for the specific torque requirements. All right, next up we're going to be attaching the pedals. You should put a little bit of grease. I'll put a little link in the description below for the grease that I like to use. It's just a general grease, and I'm just going to apply a little bit to part of the threads there. And as I insert them, the grease will distribute evenly across the threads. Obviously, make sure the left pedal lines up with the left side of the bike. They are clearly labeled and indicated, and you're going to want to obviously screw those in the correct direction. Make sure you do not strip these at all. There you go. You can see the grease distributing equally. You don't want to incorrectly thread these in. You can run the risk of stripping them, and that will cause big problems. So if you have any resistance, make sure you back it out and try it again. So we'll do that to both sides of the bike, and notice I'm hand tightening there. And once I'm pretty secure, I'll take my adjustable wrench and torque that down to the appropriate torque requirements. Now, make sure you don't scratch the paint. You can see there if you have metal and you're trying to twist and tighten things up, you could run the risk of scratching the paint. So make sure you put some tape down, tape where the contact point will be if you need to. So our next step, we're going to put together the seat. This is a typical seat. Really couldn't be easier. You can turn this bolt. You can see I'm turning this little screw here, and that basically makes it less or more tight. Okay, and so you can play around with that to make sure you get the appropriate tension. You'll take your seat unit and slide it through the hole, and then there's a clamp on the right hand side. And I'm sure you've done this before, right? On various bikes. You take this clamp here and you just kind of press it all the way down. And you can tell if it's tight or not if you move your seat, right? So wiggle your seat around. If it's moving, then you need to readjust your bolt and your clamp. But in this case, I'm pretty good. So I'll also mention there's a bolt there, or a nut you can see there. If you undo that, you can tilt your seat up or down. All right, next step, we're going to be assembling the front and the rear handbrakes. Now, this is a very challenging part. I'll do my best here to show you how this is done. We're going to unscrew. Each handlebar has these little screw pieces. We're just going to unscrew those for a moment and put them aside. Now, the assembly, the anatomy, you can see this little cable kind of slides out. There's this end piece that on the end of this cable head, and basically this metal ball that you're seeing, you're going to seat it inside of the handle as shown. Now I'm going to show you how to do this. I'll give you a better shot here in a second, but your cable is going to seat basically like this. Okay, so we're going to need that little screw piece that you just unscrewed, and we're going to need to pull this cable out and put this screw piece in between. Now the tension is really high. So instead of just pulling it out, we're going to actually unscrew. Can you see right there? This little bolt on the front wheel is called the cable anchor nut, and you're going to loosen that up, and that will unleash the tension or let go of the tension and allow you to pull that cable through really easily. Okay. All right, so here's another look at that little tension piece, that little nut that you can undo, and that cable now can just slide in and out, no problem. And you can use your adjustable wrench to tighten that up or loosen it if you need to. So the idea is to get a little bit of slack going in the cable so that you can, again, assemble this little screw piece on the end of the cable itself. All right, so to do this, you can see I'm going to insert the end of the cable, that metal ball, into the handlebar, and there's a channel that you just kind of lace the case through. You just lay it in there, and then you can tighten up the little ferrule nut here as shown. Okay, so this appropriately seats the cable and the head of the cable into the handlebar unit. Now the next step is to tighten this cable back up. So go back to that little cable anchor nut there, and you can see this is the idea, right? By the way, I'm going to tighten this up so it doesn't move on me, and I can readjust that later to the appropriate tilt for my daughter if I need to. So we'll do the same thing actually on the other side, on the rear brake. So we'll take out that little screw, that little nut, and just kind of put that aside for the moment. And we'll take our cable, and the same idea. We're going to seat that, but the tension is pretty high, so we have to go to the back, and we're going to look for that cable anchor nut again in the back. This happens to be on the right side of the bicycle. Again, check your instruction manual for the appropriate location. And we'll be loosening that nut just a little bit so that that cable can pull through. There we go. There's a little bit of slack now. And that allows me to assemble the little nut piece that we took off. There's a better shot there for you. Plenty of slack in the cable, right? That's the idea. And we'll seat the end of the cable into the brake, the channel there, as you can see. Get everything lined up. And this piece screws into the handlebar itself. Now this part is probably the most challenging part of the design, getting these brakes and these cables all figured out. So again, if you're not comfortable doing this, for the safety of your child, make sure you bring it into to the professionals to do for you. Okay. All right. So there was a little plastic covering on this center bolt on the front wheel. We're going to take that off, and now we're going to make sure that the brake pads are aligned with the rim. Okay, so you can see I just undid a little bolt there, and now I'm just going to slide that up. And before you tighten it, you're going to want to make sure that when the brakes are depressed, again, those pads align and touch the rim, not the pink tire, but the black part of the rim, okay? To do so, I'm going to squeeze that brake arm with my hand and make sure that when it's depressed, everything aligns well. Okay. Now I might need to go back and play with the tension of the cable just a little bit. Okay, so in this particular case it was too loose, so I'm going to tighten up that cable. Again, you don't want there to be too much of a gap between the brake pad and the rim. Can you see that? So you might need to play with that. You can pull the cable up with your pliers and then tighten your cable down. And the idea is, of course, when you pull that brake pad, the brake on your handlebar, you want it to actually touch the rim and depress the rim and stop the wheel. Okay, so you can tighten up those brake pads with that bolt right there when you're done. And going to you'll do the same thing with the rear wheel also. This is a look at the rear. By the way, the rear axle does have the training wheel components on it, so I'm just going to remove those. I forgot to do that earlier. Not important necessarily. You can do that at any step. I'm just going to get rid of those and put those to the side. I'm not going to be installing the training wheels on this particular bike today. Okay, so back to the brakes. So I'm going to tighten up the back cable for the back brake. I'm happy with the alignment of the brake pads against the back wheel and the rim of the back wheel. And plan on spending a little time doing this. Again, this is a little challenging, but the idea is pretty simple. You want those brake pads, when you depress the brake arm like that with your hand, you want them to align pretty well. Okay, there's a better view there. And this is the center bolt that I just touched. You can tighten that up to make sure that your center arm, your brake arm, does not rotate too far to the left or to the right. So here's how you can do that. All right, so that's about it. We're gonna put air into the tires right now. We have everything assembled and should be ready to go. So obviously when you put air in, don't overinflate. You don't wanna burst it. And that's about it. Thank you so much. I hope this video has been helpful. If you did like this video, please take a moment and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Thanks so much.